Good morning. Tina O here from Powerhouse Impact Media Group. I'm bringing you my regular weekly recap of Gather for Her, which is our Wednesday web series and a fire circle experience of wisdom harvesting between change makers. This morning we had, I want to call it an off the charts conversation. I think I might say that every Wednesday. I think I might. But this was it's a really great way to close 2021. So what we did today was we gathered what we call the members of the Braid. The members of the Braid, which is myself, Christina Benti, Charlene Senjenko, Sharon Marshall. We are, you might call us the face of Powerhouse right now, although it's not about us. But we might be the face that you see when you think of Powerhouse. And we, as a quad, if you will, um, are also the hosts of Gather, the web series. And we are also individuals in our own separate careers. We each have our own gifting and our own genius in the world. We each have our own call in the world, and we gather in a place called Powerhouse, and we work together as wisdom listeners and wisdom activators and wisdom lean oners. We lean on each other, and we are holding the ship, if you will, of the house so that all of you can walk with us. We gathered today to talk about what it feels like when the braid is the boardroom. When a braided approach, but I really want to get away from the word approach because it sounds like it's this extra thing that we do, like it's a mindset. And it's not that it isn't a mindset, but when a braid becomes the boardroom, it's an integrated way of being in business, in politics, in whatever sector that you're in. It's a way of being. And so we unpack that today. And there were so many pieces that came up in it. We opened with our own individual process of even like wrapping our head around the context of what does it even mean? What does it braid? What did it mean to us? And so H.E.R opened with, it started for her as Nika. And Nika, if you haven't watched it yet, H.E.R has a one-woman show, Nika, and something the fire. I keep thinking about this other story we've got called Nika and the Fire Shoes. And Nika represents like her own inner voice of fire, her own inner voice of question, her own inner voice of curiosity. You might want to call it inner child, sure, but it's the timeless part of her that is the unquenchable call to living and call to potential. And when Nika kind of arrived on the scene for her in a full embodied way, it opened up. How do I be brave? How do I be more brave? How do I live bravely? And the next step was braiding, 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 walking with, not being in a silo and doing it alone, which then led me to my version of that. My version of that was recognizing for me to be brave and braid, it was about leaning into people. It was about trusting that I may not know what's going to happen next, but I'm going to bring my whole self to this conversation, to this boardroom, to this collective. I'm going to stop leaving parts of me outside of the room, and I'm going to start trusting you and trusting the story and trusting the boardroom. And I'm going to start letting myself rely on you. And then Christina Christina comes from systems and leadership and politics. And Christina offered the head heart connection for her. And that, her edge is around the headpiece. And yet her gifting is also in the headpiece. But shine, that's the word that she uses, shine for her happens when head and heart are integrated. And so her braid piece was about that, was allowing more heart into her work and less head. And then Sharon offered the piece of all our relations, all our relations. For her, I don't want to speak for her, but in my experience of Sharon's share today in Gather, I almost feel like there's actually nothing to learn because it's already there. It was about remembering the braid, remembering that the ancestry piece of her as an Indigenous woman, the ancestry is right there. It's in her bones. And to remember that and bring that to the boardroom, because the rest of it is, they're all extra, but the braid's already there. And so that's like the individual piece. And I think that opened up for, in the chat, everyone just kind of reflect, what would they bring? What part of a braid are they in a boardroom, in their organization, in their community? What's their strand? Then we got into this piece about remembering that a braid has tension, that a great braid, if you've ever braided anything, your son's hair, your daughter's hair, your horse's hair, if you've ever braided anything, there's tension that holds it together. And that it's not about holding hands and singing kumbaya and going, hey, we can just be more compassionate and empathetic, and all those things are good. But those are all books we've read. Those are all courses we've taken. Those are all accreditations that we have. Those are all the things that are still concepts. But in the living of them, when we start to think and have a mindset of a braided life, all like compassion and all that stuff gets handled. And there's tension in the living of it. How do we bring our whole self to the table? H.E.R swore. It always makes me laugh. I love it when she swears. And the insight for that for me was, that's a gnarly bit. And it's in our gnarly bits where that we don't often bring forward because we're so busy doing the right thing, for sure, about appropriate, polite, kind, empathetic, compassionate. When we can trust and lean into compassion and empathy and safety is established, our gnarly bits show up at the table. In a braid, when the braid becomes the boardroom, we don't experience death by committee. It's not about consensus. It's about each person in that boardroom, in that collective, in that circle, living in their highest good, and everyone around them saying, I see you in your highest good. I'm going to hold you to your highest good. And right now, your highest good's making me really uncomfortable. And I'm going to hang out in that discomfort. And I'm going to trust and lean in to the power of this braid. And this braid's going to develop more compassion and more empathy and more listening and more container, so that your highest gifting can rock. And when your highest gifting rocks, guess what? My highest gifting rocks too. So we really got into some of the awkwardness of it, which is tension. We got into some of the questions of it around, why is it hard? Why haven't we done this before? We got into the gifts of it, which are kind of easy to go to because we're living it right now, as in the four of us are. And we offered it, like we're offering it to you in your business, in your communities, in your politics, in your committees. How might you braid in 2022? We closed on our own individual mindset and perspective and what we often bring. H.E.R.'s closing words were around, we have an opening right now, which of course is directly connected to her genius, which is calling people in, calling. She stands at the fire and she calls. That's always an opening. She says, we have an opening right now to braid. And then Christina picked up. And Christina, of course, who comes from asset management, she's like, we have an opening to get our house in order. We have an opening to get our house in order, to bring our system and our heart in connection, to shine. So we have an opening to get our house in order. Then we went to Sharon, and Sharon offered for all our relations, for all our relations, for our connection, which of course is right in her gifting, which then led to me, which is mystery. The great mystery is that the clues are always already here. The knowing's already here. That's what makes story, great story, and the story that we're all in, a mystery and not a thriller. Because all of the knowing's already here. At the end of a mystery, we turn around and we're like, oh my gosh, it was here all the time. Yeah. So we've got an opening to get our house in order for all our relations and to trust the mystery that we're all in and the clues that are right here, the wisdom that is right there. How does a braid become a boardroom? How does a boardroom become the braid? We lean into each other. We lean into our story. We lean into our gifting. We stay in the room. We hold the tension, and we have deep, 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 deep faith in the collective that we are, remembering that our external world will always be a reflection of our internal world. Thank you, Christina. And so whatever's going on the outside of your committee, your organization, your community, your boardroom is a deep reflection of the internal world of what's happening in your boardroom. And I promise you, when your boardroom becomes a braid, that's that internal world meeting that external way of being out there. And then imagine braiding with your clients, customers, community. Imagine. Wow. Weaving, braiding, interconnected. So that's how we close 2021 on Gather for Her this morning. We will be gathering again in January. Our first gather is the second week in January, where we will be having a wisdom circle based on this conversation. And then our guests will begin. Please know that Powerhouse has a great boxing month special coming out that directly connects to the leader path, which you see above me here. So watch for it. What we do in the house is we walk with you. We weave with you. We braid with you. We walk as the change maker, the living change maker that we are, in deep faith and trust of the great story of all of us. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to my little recap, which is a bit longer than usual, but there was a lot to be said. And we will see you on the path, on the leader path. Have a great day, everybody.